I want to tell you about the night I finally understood what my subconscious mind really was. It was 1952, and I was sitting in a dim Los Angeles hotel room, watching a woman weep. She had come to me desperate, broken, convinced her life was already written in stone. Her marriage was crumbling. Her health was failing. She had $47 to her name and a suitcase full of rejection letters from every job she had applied for. She looked at me with hollow eyes and said something I will never forget. "Dr. Murphy, I think God just made some people to suffer, and I'm one of them." I leaned forward and I asked her a question that changed both of our lives. I said, "If you could plant a seed in the richest soil on earth, soil that would grow anything you put in it without judgment, without asking if you deserved it, would you plant weeds or would you plant roses?" She stared at me confused. "Roses, of course," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Then why?" I asked. "Have you spent 38 years planting weeds in the most fertile soil in the entire universe? The soil of your own subconscious mind." That question hung in the air between us like smoke. She did not understand it yet, but I could see something shifting behind her eyes. That tiny crack of curiosity, that whisper of possibility, and in that moment, I knew she would be okay. Because curiosity is the first seed of transformation. 6 months later, she wrote to me from her new home. Married to a man who cherished her, working at a job that fulfilled her, healthier than she had been in a decade. But here is what matters most. She did not say I had healed her. She said, "Dr. Murphy, you showed me I had been poisoning myself with my own thoughts, and the moment I stopped, everything changed." That woman taught me something profound that night, something I have spent my entire life trying to share with the world. Your subconscious mind does not care about your worthiness. It does not judge your past. It does not ask if you deserve abundance, or love, or health. It simply accepts what you plant in it and grows it with terrifying efficiency. Right now, at this very moment, your subconscious is creating your tomorrow based on what you are feeding it today. And if you are not deliberately, consciously choosing what you plant, then you are planting by default, by accident, by inheriting the fearful, limited, scarcity-based thoughts of a world that never taught you how powerful you really are. And that is the tragedy I witness every single day. People walking around with a fortune inside them, a power so vast it could reshape their entire existence, and they don't even know it's there. They're like a person sitting on a chest of gold, complaining about poverty, simply because they never looked down. I want you to understand something fundamental. Your subconscious mind does not argue with you. It does not question your beliefs. It doesn't care if what you're telling it is true or false, good or bad, constructive or destructive. It simply says yes to whatever you habitually think and feel. You tell it you're unlucky? It says yes and proceeds to create circumstances that confirm your unluckiness. You tell it money is hard to come by? It says yes and blocks every easy opportunity from your awareness. You tell it you're unworthy of love? It says yes and sabotages every relationship before it can flourish. This is not punishment. This is not some cosmic joke. This is law. Impersonal, exact, mathematical law. And here's what most people miss. If it works against you when filled with negative beliefs, it works for you with equal force when filled with positive, life-affirming beliefs. Think of a garden again. If you plant tomatoes, you get tomatoes. If you plant weeds, you get weeds. The soil doesn't judge. It doesn't say, "Oh, you seem like a nice person, so I'll give you tomatoes even though you planted weeds." No, it gives you exactly what you planted. Your subconscious mind operates on this same principle. It is the most obedient servant you will ever have. It never takes a day off. It never sleeps. Right now, while you're listening to these words, it's working, creating, manifesting the blueprint you've given it through your habitual thoughts. And the beautiful, liberating truth is this. You can change that blueprint right now. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel more ready. Not when circumstances improve. Right now. This very moment. Because the subconscious mind exists in the eternal now. It doesn't care about your past failures. It doesn't hold grudges. Feed it a new thought, a new belief, a new image, and it immediately begins working on that new instruction. This is why hope exists. This is why change is always possible, no matter how long you've been stuck in a pattern. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a thought you've had for 30 years and a thought you planted 30 seconds ago. It only knows what you're feeding at times now *. I've seen people transform their entire lives in a matter of weeks, not because they acquired some special power they didn't have before, but because they finally started using the power they'd always possessed. They stopped arguing for their limitations and started affirming their possibilities. Let me give you a practical example. Say you've struggled with money your entire life. Perhaps you grew up hearing, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or "We can't afford that," or "Rich people are greedy." These ideas sank deep into your subconscious. And so, year after year, no matter how hard you worked, you found yourself struggling. Opportunities slipped away. Unexpected expenses appeared. You might have even said, "I'm just not good with money." But here's what's really happening. Your subconscious mind has accepted poverty as your identity. It's not punishing you, it's simply being obedient. It's manifesting outwardly what you've impressed upon it inwardly. Now, what happens when you begin to change that inner conversation? When you start affirming "money flows to me easily and naturally," or "I am a magnet for abundance and opportunity," at first, your conscious mind might rebel. It might say, "That's not true. Look at your bank account." But if you persist, if you repeat these new ideas with feeling, with conviction, before sleep, upon waking, throughout your day, something remarkable begins to happen. Your subconscious mind starts accepting this new instruction. It doesn't debate with you. It doesn't say, "But remember all those years of struggle?" No. It simply begins rearranging your outer world to match this new inner blueprint. You start noticing opportunities you would have missed before. Ideas come to you. The right people cross your path. Doors open where there were once only walls. This isn't magic. This is law, mental and spiritual law, as reliable as the law of gravity. What you impress upon your subconscious mind, you express in your experience. Now I want you to understand something profound. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate whether what you're telling it is true or false, good or bad, constructive or destructive. It simply accepts what you impress upon it. It's completely impersonal, neutral, like soil that will grow whatever seed you plant in it. Plant thorns, you'll get thorns. Plant roses, you'll get roses. The soil doesn't care. It follows the law of growth without judgment. This is why you must become the watchman at the gate of your mind. You must stand guard over your thoughts, especially the thoughts you repeat, the ones you dwell on, the ones you accept as true about yourself and your life. Let me give you a practical illustration. I once counseled a woman who came to me in despair. She was chronically ill, suffering from what doctors called psychosomatic disorders, real pain, real symptoms, but no physical cause they could identify. She said to me, "Dr. Murphy, I'm always sick. I catch everything that goes around. I have a weak constitution." I stopped her right there. "Do you hear what you're saying?" I asked. "You're giving your subconscious mind a direct command. You're telling it, 'I am weak, I am sickly, I am susceptible.' And your subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, says, 'Yes, of course,' and proceeds to manifest exactly that in your body." Her face changed. She had never considered that her own words, her own habitual thoughts, were the architects of her suffering. I taught her to change the impression. Instead of affirming sickness, she began to affirm health. She would say to herself, morning and night, with feeling and conviction, "My body is a temple of the living God. Divine health flows through every cell of my being. I am strong, vibrant, and perfectly whole." Within weeks, her symptoms began to subside. Within months, she was transformed not because I performed a miracle, but because she changed the mental blueprint she was handing to her subconscious mind. You see, your subconscious doesn't create your reality arbitrarily, it creates according to the pattern you give it. Change the pattern, and you change the manifestation. This is the secret that changes everything. Now, I want to show you how this works in practical terms. Because theory without application is like a seed that never touches soil. It holds potential, but produces nothing. Think about worry for a moment. What is worry, really? It's negative goal setting. When you worry, you're not just thinking about a problem, you're actually impressing your subconscious mind with vivid images of what you don't want to happen. You're feeling the fear as if it's already real. You're rehearsing disaster. And here's what most people don't realize. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one that's vividly imagined. This is why worry is so destructive. You're essentially programming failure into your mental computer. running the same disastrous scenario over and over until your subconscious accepts it as instruction. I once counseled a businessman who was convinced he would lose his company. Every night, he lay awake imagining the bankruptcy, the shame, telling his family, watching everything crumble. He came to me exhausted, defeated, certain his intuition was warning him of inevitable collapse. But it wasn't intuition, it was creation. He was manufacturing his own disaster through mental repetition. His subconscious was receiving clear instructions. Make this happen. This is what we're focusing on. This is what we're feeling into reality. I taught him to reverse the process. Instead of worrying, he began to visualize success with the same intensity. He pictured signing new contracts, deposits hitting his account, handshakes with satisfied clients. He felt the relief, the pride, the security. He impressed these images on his subconscious with feeling and conviction. Within 3 months, his business had completely turned around. New opportunities appeared seemingly out of nowhere. A major client he'd thought was lost suddenly returned. His energy changed, his decisions improved, and reality shifted to match his new mental pattern. Was this magic? No. It was law. The same law that would have created his failure now created his success. He simply changed the blueprint he was handing to his subconscious mind. This is why I tell you, never mentally rehearse what you fear. Your imagination is too powerful to waste on disaster. Let me share something that might surprise you. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one vividly imagined. Think about that for a moment. When you lie in bed at night, replaying a humiliating moment from your past, your body responds as if it's happening right now. Your heart races, your face flushes, your muscles tense. The subconscious doesn't say, "Oh, this is just a memory, we can relax." No. It accepts the image and recreates the feeling. This is both the danger and the opportunity. I once counseled a woman who had been trying to find work for 18 months. 18 months. Every morning, she would wake up and immediately begin to worry. What if I don't find anything today? What if they reject me again? What if I'm not qualified enough? She would imagine herself sitting across from an interviewer, stumbling over her words, seeing disappointment in their eyes. She rehearsed failure so thoroughly that by the time she walked into an actual interview, her subconscious had already accepted defeat as the pattern. Her nervousness, her hesitation, her apologetic tone, all of it flowed naturally from the mental movie she'd been playing on repeat. I asked her to do something simple. For just 10 minutes each morning and each evening, I wanted her to imagine a different scene. Not some vague wish, but a specific, detailed picture. She was to see herself dressed professionally, walking into an office with confidence. She would imagine shaking hands firmly, answering questions with calm clarity, and feeling a sense of rightness about the position. Most importantly, she was to imagine the feeling of gratitude, the warm sensation of knowing she was exactly where she belonged. She resisted at first. "But that feels like lying to myself," she said. "I don't have a job. How can I feel grateful for something that hasn't happened?" This is where most people stumble. They think imagination is dishonest. But I ask you, is it more honest to imagine failure? Is it more truthful to rehearse catastrophe? Your imagination will create something either way. The question is not whether to use it, but how to direct it. Within 3 weeks, this woman received 2 job offers. 2. And when I spoke with her afterward, she said something remarkable. The strangest thing happened. When I walked into that final interview, I felt like I'd been there before. Everything felt familiar. Natural. I wasn't trying to impress them, I was just being myself. Of course it felt familiar. She had already lived it dozens of times in her imagination. She stepped into success because her mind had already paved the road. This is the secret most people never grasp. They think visualization is about wishful thinking, about daydreaming while life passes them by. But it's the opposite. When you rehearse something mentally with emotion and belief, you're not escaping reality, you're constructing it. You're laying down the neural pathways, the emotional patterns, the spiritual blueprint that reality will follow. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you see yourself succeeding, feeling the emotions of that success, your subconscious accepts it as fact. And once it accepts something as fact, it moves heaven and earth to make the outer world match the inner image. I've seen this work in every area of life. A man came to me once, drowning in debt, afraid he'd lose his home. He couldn't sleep. The worry consumed him. I told him, every night before you sleep, see yourself opening a letter that says, paid in full. Feel the relief washing over you. Hear yourself saying, thank you for the solution that has come. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Pay bills with imagination? But he was desperate enough to try. 3 weeks later, he received an unexpected call. A company he'd worked for years ago had been bought out, and there was unclaimed profit sharing owed to him. The check arrived almost to the dollar, covering what he owed. Coincidence? No. Correspondence. The outer matching the inner. This is the law. You don't create from nothing, you create from consciousness. Everything you see around you was once invisible. Every building, every invention, every relationship began as a thought, a mental image, before it became physical. You are doing this constantly, whether you know it or not. The question is, what are you imagining? What scene are you replaying in your mind? Because that's what you're bringing into your world. Most people are expert visualizers of disaster. They imagine the job interview going wrong. They see themselves rejected, humiliated, failing. They rehearse the argument with their spouse over and over. They envision the bank account empty, the diagnosis terminal, the future bleak. And then they wonder why their life feels like a string of misfortunes. You must become as deliberate about your inner images as an architect is about blueprints. You wouldn't build a house from random sketches. Why would you build a life from random thoughts? The truth is, most people are living in a perpetual state of mental drift. They wake up and immediately tune into the world's broadcast, the news, the opinions, the worries of others, and they let that become their inner dialogue. They're reacting instead of creating. They're absorbing instead of directing. I'm telling you right now, you cannot afford to be passive with your mind. Every moment you spend dwelling on what you don't want is a moment invested in bringing more of it into your experience. Your subconscious doesn't judge. It doesn't say, oh, she's worrying about poverty, so I'll give her wealth instead. No. It says, she's focused on poverty with emotion and repetition. That must be what she wants. Let me deliver more evidence of lack. This is why worry is such a destructive force. Worry is actually negative goal setting. When you worry, you're vividly imagining an undesirable outcome, feeling the emotions associated with it, and repeating this process over and over. You're using the exact same creative mechanism that could bring you success, but you're pointing it in the opposite direction. Think about the person who constantly worries about getting sick. They imagine the symptoms, they feel the fear, they tell others about their concerns, they research diseases late at night, and then, mysteriously, they manifest the very illness they feared. They'll say, see, I knew it would happen, but they don't realize they were the architect of their own suffering. Now contrast that with the person who holds a clear vision of radiant health. They see themselves energetic and vibrant. They feel gratitude for their body's strength. They speak words of wellness. They fall asleep imagining themselves whole and complete. That person is using the same law, but consciously, deliberately, in their favor. You see, the law of subconscious manifestation is neutral. It's like electricity, it doesn't care whether you use it to light up a hospital or burn down a building. It simply responds to how you direct it. And you direct it through the images you habitually hold in your mind and the feelings you attach to those images. So, let me ask you, what are you currently directing your creative power toward? What occupies your mental screen during idle moments? When you're driving, showering, falling asleep, where does your mind naturally drift? Because those undirected moments reveal your true habitual thinking, and your habitual thinking is writing the script of your future. You see, most people think they're thinking about what they want. But if you actually stop and listen, really listen to the conversation happening inside your head, you'll discover something startling. You're not thinking about what you want at all. You're rehearsing what you fear. You're imagining the conversation going wrong, the interview where you stumble, the presentation where people look bored, the rejection, the disappointment, the embarrassment. You're running these scenarios over and over, perfecting them, until they become so vivid, so real in your mind, that your subconscious accepts them as instructions. And then you wonder why these things keep happening to you. Here's what I need you to understand. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one you've vividly imagined. When you repeatedly visualize failure, when you emotionally rehearse disaster, you're programming yourself just as effectively as if you were visualizing success. The mechanism is identical. The power is the same, you're just pointing it in the wrong direction. Think of your mind as a garden. Whatever seeds you plant consistently, those are the crops you'll harvest. You can't plant seeds of worry and reap a harvest of confidence. You can't cultivate thoughts of lack and poverty and expect abundance to somehow spontaneously appear. The law is exact. The garden grows what you plant. But here's the beautiful part. Once you understand this, once you truly grasp that you are the gardener, everything changes. Because if you've been accidentally creating circumstances you don't want, that means you have the power to deliberately create circumstances you do want. The same mechanism that's been working against you can work for you. I've seen this transformation countless times. A person comes to me, their life in shambles, drowning in problems, and when we examine their habitual thinking, when we shine a light on the conversations they're having with themselves all day long, the mystery dissolves. There's no mystery at all. They've been using the most powerful creative force in the universe to manufacture their own suffering. And the moment they change the inner conversation, the outer circumstances begin to shift. Not sometimes, not occasionally, always. Because the law is impersonal and reliable. You see, most people live their entire lives never understanding this simple truth. They pray, they wish, they hope, but they never truly impress their subconscious mind with the feeling of their wish fulfilled. They speak words without conviction. They visualize without emotion. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Let me be absolutely clear. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to empty words. It doesn't care about your intellectual understanding or your clever affirmations repeated mechanically while your heart remains cold and doubtful. Your subconscious responds to time's feeling asterisk. It responds to the emotional conviction behind your thoughts. Think of it this way. If I tell you, I am prosperous, but inside I feel poor, worried, and anxious about money, which message do you think reaches my subconscious? The words or the feeling? The feeling, always the feeling. Your subconscious accepts what you feel, to be true, not what you merely say. This is why so many people fail with affirmations. They stand in front of a mirror, repeating phrases they've read somewhere, but their hearts aren't in it. Their emotions contradict every word they speak. And the subconscious, being faithful and obedient, accepts the dominant feeling, which is usually fear, doubt, or unworthiness. You must understand that your feeling is the secret. Your feeling is the creative power. When you can generate the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you can feel healthy while symptoms persist, when you can feel prosperous while your bank account looks empty, when you can feel loved while you're alone, that's times when you've mastered this law. I'm not talking about pretending. I'm not talking about denying your current reality or lying to yourself. I'm talking about occupying the consciousness of your desire fulfilled. I'm talking about living from your desire, not toward it. There's a vast difference between these two states. When you live toward your desire, you're always in a state of wanting, of reaching, of not having. But when you live from your desire, you've already assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You've already claimed it in consciousness. And your outer world must inevitably conform to this inner conviction. This is the natural order of creation. Consciousness always externalizes itself. What you are conscious of being, you must become. Not might become. Not could become. Asterisk. Must become. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, well, I'm not sure about that. It doesn't debate. It doesn't cross-examine your claims. It simply accepts what you feed it and works day and night to make it real in your experience. This is why a person who constantly says, I never have enough money, finds their wallet perpetually empty. This is why someone who repeats, I always get sick in winter, develops a cold like clockwork every December. The subconscious is listening, always listening, and it's extraordinarily obedient. But here's what most people miss, and this is critical. Your subconscious doesn't only respond to your words, it responds with even greater power to your feelings. The emotional charge behind your thoughts is what gives them creative potency. You can say, I am wealthy 1,000 times, but if you feel poor while you're saying it, if there's a knot of anxiety in your stomach, if your heart is heavy with worry about bills, then it's the feeling your subconscious accepts as the true instruction. You're essentially canceling your own prayer. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. They mechanically repeat phrases, while their entire emotional being screams the opposite. They're trying to write a new program while simultaneously running the old one at full volume. The secret, and I mean this with every fiber of my being, is to feel the reality of your desire times now asterisk. Not when it arrives. Not when circumstances change. Asterisk. Now, asterisk. When you pray for health, you must feel healthy in that moment. When you affirm prosperity, you must generate the feeling of abundance flowing through your life right now. When you declare love, you must touch that sense of being deeply loved in this present instant, because your subconscious mind exists in an eternal now. It doesn't distinguish between tomorrow and today, between memory and imagination, between what happened and what you vividly picture. To your subconscious, a thought experienced with emotional intensity times is times a fact. This is not fantasy. This is not pretending. This is impressing upon the creative medium of your deeper mind the blueprint from which your outer world will be constructed. Think of it this way. When an architect wants to build a magnificent structure, he doesn't stand at an empty lot and hope really hard. He creates detailed plans. He sees it complete in his mind's eye first. Then reality conforms to the vision. You are the architect of your life. And here's what most people miss. The architect doesn't worry about how times the building will stand. He doesn't concern himself with the molecular structure of steel or the chemical composition of concrete. He trusts the laws of physics, the principles of engineering. He designs, and the universe handles the details. You must do the same with your desires. Stop asking how. Stop demanding to see the entire staircase before you take the first step. Your conscious mind cannot possibly comprehend all the ways your subconscious can bring your desire to fruition. It has access to infinite intelligence, to channels and connections you've never even considered. I've seen this play out in the most remarkable ways. A woman wanted to start her own business but had no capital, no connections, no clear path forward. Instead of drowning in the how, she simply impressed upon her subconscious the feeling of being a successful business owner. She felt the satisfaction of serving her clients, the joy of financial independence, the pride of building something meaningful. 3 weeks later, she struck up a conversation with a stranger at a coffee shop. That stranger became her first investor and mentor. Could she have planned that encounter? Could her conscious mind have orchestrated that coincidence? Of course not. But her subconscious, working with infinite intelligence, arranged circumstances, people, and events to match her inner conviction. This is not magic. This is law. Mental law, as reliable as the law of gravity. Your subconscious mind is connected to the universal subconscious. It has access to knowledge and resources far beyond your individual awareness. When you impress a desire upon it with feeling and faith, it begins to work through channels you cannot see, orchestrating events you could never consciously arrange. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't sit beside it, pulling it upward, demanding to know how it will grow. You plant it in fertile soil, you water it, you trust in the life principle within that seed. And in time, without your interference, it breaks through the ground and becomes the tree it was always meant to be. Your desire is that seed. Your subconscious mind is the soil. Your feeling is the water. And faith, absolute, unwavering faith, is the sunlight that allows it to grow. You can recite affirmations all day long, but if your heart is filled with doubt, if your emotions are saturated with fear, nothing will manifest. It's like planting a seed and then pouring salt water on it. The seed doesn't stand a chance. This is where most people falter. They say the words, but they don't embody the feeling. They affirm abundance while feeling the constriction of lack. They declare health while their body tenses with worry. And then they wonder why their prayers go unanswered. Let me be clear. Your prayers are always answered. Always. But they're answered according to the nature of your subconscious impression, not the fleeting wishes of your conscious mind. If you say, I am wealthy, but feel poor, your subconscious registers poverty. It doesn't hear your words, it feels your conviction. And it will create circumstances that match that inner conviction with absolute precision. This is not punishment. This is law. Impersonal, impartial, and infinitely reliable. So how do you change the feeling? How do you shift from doubt to faith? From fear to confidence? You do it through repetition and imagination combined with relaxation. You must gently, persistently, lovingly impress your subconscious mind with the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Notice I said the feeling of your wish fulfilled, not the desire for it, not the hope for it, but the actual feeling of already having it. This is the secret that transforms everything. When you go to sleep at night, your conscious mind releases its grip. The gateway to your subconscious swings wide open. This is your golden opportunity. This is when you do your most powerful work. Before sleep, assume the feeling of your wish being already accomplished. If you desire healing, feel the sensation of perfect health coursing through your body. If you seek prosperity, feel the relief, the freedom, the joy of abundant supply. If you long for love, feel yourself embraced, cherished, completely accepted. Don't strain, don't force. Simply relax into the feeling as though it's the most natural thing in the world, because it is. You're not creating something foreign, you're returning to your natural state of wholeness. Do this consistently, night after night, and something miraculous begins to happen. Your subconscious mind accepts this new impression. It begins to reorganize your entire world to match this inner conviction. Opportunities appear. People come into your life. Circumstances shift in ways you could never have orchestrated consciously. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge. It doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Are you sure about this?" It simply accepts what you consistently impress upon it as true. This is why affirmations work, not because they're magical incantations, but because they're tools for communicating directly with this powerful inner force. But here's where most people stumble. They affirm once, maybe twice, with all the enthusiasm of reading a phone book, and then wonder why nothing changes. They say, "I am prosperous," while their entire emotional state screams poverty. They declare, "I am confident," while trembling with doubt. And the subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, responds to the feeling, not the words. Feeling is the secret. I want you to really hear that. When you make an affirmation, you must feel it as already true. You must generate the emotional state that would accompany the reality you desire. If you're affirming health, you must feel the vitality, the energy, the wellness coursing through your body right now, not as something you hope for, but as something you already possess. This isn't pretending. This is recognizing a fundamental truth. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you imagine something with sufficient sensory detail and emotional intensity, your subconscious accepts it as fact and begins to make it manifest in your outer world. Think of an actor who fully inhabits a role. They don't just recite lines, they become the character. They feel what that person feels, think what they think, move how they move. And for those moments on stage or screen, the transformation is real. Your life works the same way. You are always acting out the role your subconscious believes you should play. Change the script you've given it, and the performance changes. I've witnessed this countless times. A woman came to me, burdened by debt, feeling trapped and hopeless. I taught her to spend 10 minutes every night before sleep, imagining herself financially free, not vaguely, but specifically. She saw herself opening her bank statement with a smile. She felt the relief, the lightness in her chest. She heard herself saying yes to opportunities without that familiar knot of fear. Within weeks, she received an unexpected job offer. Within months, a debt she thought was permanent was forgiven through a legal technicality she'd never known existed. Within a year, she had more savings than she'd ever thought possible. The external circumstances shifted because the internal blueprint had been rewritten. She didn't chase the money. She didn't manipulate or scheme. She simply changed the mental soil, and different seeds began to grow. This is the profound truth that most never grasp. You cannot harvest what you have not planted in consciousness. You cannot reap abundance from seeds of poverty. You cannot gather peace from plantings of anxiety. The harvest always, without exception, matches the seed. And here's what makes this so liberating. You don't need anyone's permission to change your mental seeds. You don't need a degree, a credential, or an authority figure to approve your new self-concept. The garden of your mind is yours alone. You are the sole gardener. You decide what grows there. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Every limiting belief you currently hold was planted by someone else or by a past version of yourself who didn't know better. Your parents, your teachers, your culture, your early experiences, they all scattered seeds in your mental garden. Some of those seeds were beautiful. Others were weeds disguised as wisdom. Money doesn't grow on trees. That's a weed. You have to work hard for every penny. That's a weed. Rich people are greedy. That's a poisonous weed that will strangle any prosperity trying to grow. You're not smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough. Weeds, all of them. But here's the beautiful part. Just because these weeds are currently growing in your garden doesn't mean they have to stay there. You can uproot them. You can clear the soil. You can plant new seeds deliberately, consciously, with intention. This is the work. Not the dramatic, one-time transformation that requires superhuman effort, but the quiet, daily discipline of tending your mental garden, pulling weeds when they appear, watering the seeds you actually want to grow, protecting the tender shoots of your new self-concept from the harsh criticism of doubt. Every time you catch yourself thinking a poverty thought, you have a choice. You can water it with repetition and attention, or you can starve it by turning your focus elsewhere. Every time you notice a limiting belief, you can question it. Is this actually true? Or is this just an old seed someone else planted? And here's something remarkable that happens when you start questioning these beliefs. You discover that most of them crumble under the slightest examination. That thought that you're not good enough to be wealthy? Where's the evidence? What cosmic law declares you unworthy? That belief that money corrupts? Look around at the generous, kind-hearted people who have abundance and use it to lift others up. The truth is, your subconscious doesn't care whether a belief is true or false. It only cares whether you've accepted it as true. And once you've accepted something, your subconscious works tirelessly to prove you right. Tell yourself you're unlucky with money, and you'll unconsciously overlook opportunities, sabotage your own efforts, and interpret every setback as confirmation of your belief. But tell yourself that prosperity is your natural state, that abundance flows to you easily and frequently, and watch how your perception shifts. Suddenly, you notice opportunities you walked past 100 times before. You feel confident pursuing ideas that once seemed too ambitious. You take actions that seemed risky when you believed in scarcity but feel perfectly natural when you know abundance is yours. I've watched this transformation countless times. People who couldn't see past their next bill suddenly planning 5 years ahead. Individuals who apologize for charging what they're worth now confidently commanding premium prices. Workers who believe they'd always struggle now building wealth that supports their families for generations. The shift doesn't happen because the world changed. It happens because their inner world changed first. They stopped watering the weeds of limitation and started cultivating the garden of possibility. They stopped rehearsing poverty in their minds and started practicing prosperity in their imagination. And here's what makes this so powerful. Your imagination is the preview of your life's coming attractions. When you imagine yourself prosperous, when you feel what it's like to have financial freedom, when you see yourself making that investment or receiving that income, you're not just daydreaming. You're impressing your subconscious mind with a new pattern. You're giving it new instructions. You're planting seeds of a different kind entirely. And here's what happens when you consistently plant those new seeds. Your subconscious begins to accept them as true. It doesn't argue, it doesn't debate. It simply accepts what you persistently impress upon it and begins to express that in your life. I've seen this happen thousands of times. A person comes to me, defeated, convinced that poverty is their destiny. They say, "Dr. Murphy, I've always been poor. My parents were poor. Everyone in my family struggles financially." And I tell them what I'm telling you now. Your past does not determine your future unless you continue to give it that power. We work together to change the inner conversation. Instead of "I never have enough," we plant "I am a channel through which abundance flows freely." Instead of "money always runs out," we establish "I am financially secure and prosperous." At first, it feels strange to them. Sometimes they even laugh nervously, as if saying these words might somehow make things worse. But they persist. They say these statements with feeling, morning and evening. They visualize abundance. They feel what it would be like to have their needs met and exceeded. And gradually, sometimes quickly, sometimes over weeks, their circumstances begin to shift. An unexpected opportunity appears. A debt is forgiven. A promotion comes through. Money arrives from forgotten sources. The outer world conforms to the inner pattern. This is law. This is how it works. Now, some people hear this and they say, "Well, that's just positive thinking." No, this is far more than positive thinking. Positive thinking without feeling, without conviction, without impressing the subconscious mind, is like planting seeds on concrete. Nothing grows. What I'm describing is scientific prayer. It's the conscious, deliberate use of your mind to create a new state of consciousness. You're not just thinking positive thoughts and hoping for the best. You're systematically changing your dominant mental attitude. You're reconditioning your subconscious mind with purposeful intention. And the subconscious mind, being the faithful servant that it is, takes your dominant thoughts and feelings and makes them manifest in your experience. It must. It cannot do otherwise. That's its nature. Now think about water for a moment. Water conforms to the shape of whatever container holds it. Pour it into a jar, and it becomes the jar. Pour it into a bottle, and it becomes the bottle. It has no resistance, no argument with the vessel. It simply is what it must be, given the conditions. Your subconscious mind works exactly the same way. It takes the shape of your habitual thinking. It conforms to your mental patterns. If you constantly think thoughts of limitation, of fear, of unworthiness, your subconscious accepts this as the mold and produces experiences that match. If you think thoughts of abundance, of courage, of confidence, your subconscious accepts this pattern instead and creates accordingly. The question isn't whether your subconscious will respond. The question is, what are you impressing upon it? Most people go through life unconscious of this process. They think whatever thoughts happen to drift through their minds. They replay old grievances. They rehearse worst-case scenarios. They focus on what they don't want with far more intensity than what they do want. And then they wonder why their lives don't change. They're like gardeners planting weeds and expecting roses. You see, your subconscious doesn't judge the seeds you plant. It doesn't say, this is a good thought, I'll accept it, or this is a bad thought, I'll reject it. It accepts everything. It's completely impartial. Whatever you plant with feeling, with conviction, with repetition, that's what grows. This is why I emphasize the importance of becoming a mental watchman. You must guard the doorway of your mind. You must become selective about what you allow to take root in your consciousness. When a negative thought appears, and they will appear, don't fight it. Don't resist it. Simply refuse to energize it with your attention and emotion. Let it pass like a cloud across the sky. Instead, turn your attention immediately to its opposite. If fear arises, contemplate courage. If lack appears, dwell on abundance. If illness manifests, focus on perfect health. This isn't denial. This is direction. You're directing the creative power within you toward what you truly desire. Remember, your subconscious is always listening. It's recording every habitual thought pattern. It's noting where your attention consistently goes. And it's faithfully producing more of whatever you're focused upon. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. It's not the occasional powerful visualization that changes your life. It's the steady, repeated thoughts you think day after day. The habitual mental atmosphere you maintain. You might spend 10 minutes doing affirmations in the morning, but if you spend the next 14 hours worrying, complaining, and expecting the worst, which pattern do you think your subconscious is recording as dominant? Which instruction is it receiving most clearly? The subconscious mind responds to the predominant mental attitude, not the occasional one, not the emergency one, the habitual one. This is actually tremendously empowering when you understand it. It means you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to maintain flawless, positive thinking every single moment. What you need is a shift in your baseline, a change in what's normal for you. If your default mental state has been anxiety and limitation, and you begin shifting that baseline toward expectation and possibility, your subconscious begins responding to the new pattern. It starts producing conditions that match your new habitual frequency. Think of it like tuning a radio. You don't need to force the signal. You simply adjust the dial until you're aligned with the frequency you want to receive. Your subconscious is always broadcasting. The question is, what frequency are you tuned to most of the time? This is where self-observation becomes crucial. You must become aware of your habitual thoughts. Most people go through their days on autopilot, thinking the same thoughts they thought yesterday, which were the same thoughts they had the day before. They're caught in loops they don't even recognize. Begin watching your mind, not with judgment, with curiosity. When you catch yourself in a negative thought pattern, don't berate yourself for it. Simply notice it. Recognize it as a habit, not as truth. And then, gently redirect. This is the practice. This is the work. Not force, but gentle, persistent redirection. Like training a puppy. You wouldn't scold it harshly, you'd patiently guide it back to where you want it to go. Do the same with your attention. Each time you redirect a negative thought toward a constructive one, you're weakening the old neural pathway and strengthening a new one. Each time you choose a different response, you're reprogramming the subconscious mind. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A person who practices mental discipline for 5 minutes every day will see greater transformation than someone who attempts a heroic 2-hour session once a month. The subconscious responds to repetition, not to occasional bursts of effort. It's like learning to play an instrument. 15 minutes of daily practice creates mastery far more effectively than an all-day marathon once in a while. And here's something most people overlook. The subconscious doesn't recognize the difference between a thought you're having and a thought you're observing. Let me say that again because it's crucial. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between you genuinely believing something and you simply entertaining the thought repeatedly. This is both a danger and an opportunity. The danger is that worrying, which is really just repeatedly imagining negative outcomes, programs your subconscious just as effectively as deliberate visualization. When you replay that embarrassing moment from last week 50 times, you're not processing it or learning from it. You're literally training your subconscious mind to expect more embarrassment. You're rehearsing failure. But the opportunity is magnificent. It means you don't have to truly believe something at first for it to take root in your subconscious. You simply need to present it to your inner mind repeatedly, with feeling. The belief follows the repetition. Faith is built, not discovered. I've seen people transform their health, their relationships, their financial situations not because they were initially convinced it would work, but because they faithfully presented new ideas to their subconscious minds day after day. Their conscious doubt was present, yes, but their consistent practice was more powerful than their skepticism. Think of a child learning to read. At first, the symbols on the page mean nothing, but through repetition, seeing the letter A connected to the sound ah, hundreds of times the connection becomes automatic. The child doesn't have to believe in reading for it to work. The repetition creates the neural pathway, and comprehension follows. Your mental reprogramming works the same way. You present the new thought, you feel the emotion attached to it, you repeat this process, and gradually, imperceptibly, the subconscious accepts this new blueprint as reality. Now, I want to address something that stops many people in their tracks. They say to me, "But Dr. Murphy, I've tried this, I've visualized, I've affirmed, and nothing happened. In fact, things got worse." And when I hear this, I always ask the same question: what were you feeling while you were affirming? They pause. They think. And then they admit, "Well, I was worried it wouldn't work. I was thinking about all my bills. I was feeling desperate." You see, there's the problem. The subconscious mind doesn't respond to your words alone. It responds to the feeling, the conviction, the emotional tone behind those words. If you say, "I am prosperous," but you feel fear, anxiety, and lack, which message do you think the subconscious receives? It receives the fear. It receives the anxiety. It receives the dominant emotional state. Your feeling is the language of the subconscious. Words without feeling are like seeds without soil. They have no power to take root. But words infused with feeling, with conviction, with a quiet inner knowing, these are seeds planted in fertile ground. This is why I always emphasize the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You don't just think about what you want. You don't just repeat hollow phrases. You enter into the feeling of already having it. You create that inner state of satisfaction, of gratitude, of peaceful possession. How do you do this? You use your imagination. You create a scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Perhaps you imagine a friend congratulating you. Perhaps you see yourself holding the document that proves your success. Perhaps you simply feel the relief, the joy, the quiet confidence of knowing it is done. And you return to this scene, this feeling, again and again, before sleep, during quiet moments throughout your day. You marinate your consciousness in this state, and gradually, the subconscious accepts it. The deeper mind says, "Yes, this is true. This is my reality." And then from that inner acceptance, circumstances begin to shift. Because that's the nature of the subconscious. It doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It simply accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and conviction. And once it accepts, it works to bring that impression into your experience. Now, I want you to consider something else. Many people come to me and say, "Dr. Murphy, I've been affirming and visualizing for weeks, but nothing has changed. Why isn't this working?" And when I sit down with them, I discover the same pattern every single time. They're doing the techniques, yes. They're saying the words, but underneath, there's a current of doubt running through everything they do. They affirm abundance while secretly believing they'll always struggle. They visualize health while simultaneously worrying about every symptom. They speak words of confidence while their inner conversation remains filled with self-criticism. You see, the subconscious doesn't respond to your surface words. It responds to what you truly accept as real. It responds to the feeling behind the thought, the conviction beneath the statement. This is why I always emphasize, it's not about repetition alone, it's about repetition with acceptance. It's about affirming until you feel that inner click, that subtle shift where the statement no longer feels like wishful thinking but like a simple truth. When I affirm, I am radiating health and vitality. I don't say it desperately, pleading with the universe to make it so. I say it with the same calm certainty I would say, "The sun rises in the east." It's a statement of fact to my inner mind. And I continue until that's exactly how it feels. And here's something beautiful that happens when you reach that state. The affirmation begins to feel natural. You no longer have to force yourself to think positively. The positive thought becomes your default. The expectation of good becomes automatic. I've watched this transformation in thousands of people. At first, their affirmations are strained, effortful, but gradually, as they persist, something softens. The resistance fades. And one day, they realize they're no longer fighting their own mind, they're working in harmony with it. The conscious and subconscious have aligned, and when that happens, change becomes not only possible but inevitable. So if you're practicing these principles and feeling that internal resistance, don't be discouraged. That resistance is simply old programming asserting itself. It's the accumulated beliefs of years trying to maintain their position. Your job is not to fight it aggressively but to gently, persistently replace it with a new pattern. Think of it this way. If you've been walking the same path through a forest for 20 years, that path becomes worn, clear, easy to follow. Even when you decide to take a new route, your feet want to return to the familiar trail. The old path doesn't disappear overnight. But each time you choose the new direction, you're creating a new pathway in your consciousness. Eventually, with consistent use, this new path becomes just as natural, just as automatic as the old one ever was. This is precisely what happens in your subconscious mind when you introduce new thoughts. The old neural pathways, the old belief structures, they still exist. They've been reinforced thousands of times through repetition. But you have the power to create new pathways through the deliberate, repeated use of constructive thoughts and affirmations. I've watched this transformation occur in countless individuals who applied these principles with dedication. One woman who came to see me had been repeating to herself for years, "I'm not good with money, I never have enough." This wasn't just a casual thought, it was her identity. It had been reinforced by her parents, by her early experiences, by every financial struggle she encountered. That struggle then became evidence supporting her belief, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. When she began affirming, "Money flows to me easily and naturally. I am financially secure and abundant," her conscious mind immediately rejected it. She felt like a liar. Every bill, every empty pocket seemed to mock her new affirmation. But I encouraged her to persist, not with gritted teeth and force, but with gentle, patient repetition. Morning and night, she would relax her body, quiet her mind, and repeat these words with feeling. Within 3 months, something remarkable happened. She didn't win the lottery or receive an unexpected inheritance. Instead, opportunities began appearing that she'd previously been blind to. A former colleague mentioned a position that paid significantly more than her current job. She suddenly had ideas for a side income she'd never considered before. Her relationship with money itself shifted. She stopped seeing it as an adversary and began treating it as a friend. Within 3 months, she'd increased her income by 40%. Not through force, not through anxiety, through alignment. This is the evidence your subconscious mind requires. Not proof that money falls from the sky, but proof that when you change internally, your external world reorganizes itself to match. Now, let me address something that trips people up constantly. They ask, "How long will this take? When will I see results?" These questions themselves reveal the problem. They're asking from a place of lack, from a consciousness of, I don't have it yet. Every time you ask when, you're affirming the absence of what you desire. The truth? Results appear in perfect timing when you stop demanding them on your schedule. Your subconscious doesn't operate on deadlines. It operates on readiness. It manifests when your inner conviction is so complete that the outer manifestation becomes inevitable. I've seen transformations happen overnight. I've seen them unfold over months. The timeline isn't what matters. What matters is whether you're willing to maintain your mental discipline regardless of the calendar. Think of it this way. If you plant a seed, do you dig it up every day to check if it's growing? Of course not. You trust the process. You water it, provide sunlight, and allow nature to work. Your desires are the same. You plant them through clear intention. You water them through repeated affirmation and feeling. You provide sunlight through faith and expectation. Then you let the subconscious do what it does, naturally bring things into form. The interference happens when you keep checking. When you wake up each morning and immediately scan your life for evidence of change. When you measure and judge and decide it's not working fast enough. That checking? That's doubt disguised as vigilance. And doubt is fertilizer for the opposite of what you want. Here's what I want you to understand deeply. Your subconscious is always working. Right now, as you hear these words, it's arranging circumstances, drawing resources, aligning people and events according to your dominant mental patterns. The question isn't whether it's working constantly. The question is, what are you instructing it to create? Every thought is an instruction. Every feeling is a command. Every mental image you dwell upon is a blueprint you're handing to the master builder within you. So when you catch yourself asking, when will this happen? Replace that question with a statement of knowing, it is already done in consciousness. The outer form is following. This isn't denial of your current circumstances. It's recognition of the process. You can acknowledge where you are while claiming where you're going. This is why you must persist in your assumption. Not for a day or a week, but until the inner conviction becomes so natural that the outer world has no choice but to conform. I've seen people transform their entire lives through this understanding. A woman who had been struggling financially for years began to assume the feeling of abundance. Not occasionally, not when she felt like it, but as her dominant mental attitude. She would wake each morning and consciously feel prosperous before checking her bank account. She would walk through stores, not with longing, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows they can have what they need. Within months, opportunities began appearing. An unexpected promotion. A side business that suddenly gained traction. Money that had been owed to her for years was suddenly repaid. The circumstances didn't change because she wished harder. They changed because she had altered the foundation of her consciousness. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't question your assumptions. It simply accepts what you persistently feel to be true and goes to work to make it so. This is why your consistent mental diet is infinitely more important than your occasional peak experiences. You might have a moment of powerful visualization where you feel absolutely certain of your desire. That's wonderful. But if you spend the remaining 23 hours of your day dwelling in doubt, worry, and contradiction, which state do you think your subconscious will accept as your true belief? The answer is obvious. Your subconscious responds to your habitual thinking, not your hopeful thinking. This brings us to one of the most practical applications of this law, the practice of mental equivalence. You must build within your consciousness the mental equivalent of what you wish to experience externally. If you want health, you must build the consciousness of health. If you want success, you must develop the consciousness of success. If you want harmonious relationships, you must first establish harmony within your own mind. The mental equivalent is not just thinking about something, it's living from it internally before it appears externally. It's the difference between wanting to be confident and actually feeling confident in your imagination until that feeling becomes your natural state. Let me be very clear about something that causes much confusion. When I speak of building a mental equivalent, I'm not suggesting you pretend your current circumstances don't exist. You can be fully aware of where you are while simultaneously knowing where you're going. Think of it this way. A pilot setting course from New York to London doesn't deny that he's currently in New York. He acknowledges his starting point. But from the moment he charts his course, his mind is oriented toward London. Every instrument reading, every adjustment, every decision is made with London as his fixed destination. He sees New York on his instruments, but he's flying toward London in his consciousness. This is the balance you must maintain. You acknowledge your present circumstances without giving them power over your future. You see them as temporary, as the starting point of your journey, not as the definition of what's possible for you. I've worked with people who were deeply in debt, and when I taught them this principle, some misunderstood. They thought I was telling them to throw away their bills, to ignore their creditors, to pretend the debt didn't exist. That's not mental equivalent building, that's denial, and denial solves nothing. What I taught them instead was this. Yes, you owe this money. That's your current location. But now, starting from here, we're going to build the consciousness of financial freedom. We're going to impress upon your subconscious mind the feeling of being debt-free, of having abundance, of financial peace. And we're going to let that new consciousness guide your actions, your decisions, your responses to opportunities. The difference is profound. The person living in denial continues the same patterns that created the debt, but the person building a new mental equivalent begins to think differently, act differently, see opportunities differently. Their outer world hasn't changed yet, but their inner world has shifted, and that shift is what creates the real transformation. Your subconscious mind is always working from your dominant mental patterns. If your dominant pattern is, I'm in debt and it's hopeless, that's the reality it will perpetuate. But if your dominant pattern becomes, I am moving toward financial freedom and my subconscious is guiding me there, you activate an entirely different set of creative powers. This is why affirmation without feeling accomplishes so little. Some people say words of prosperity while their hearts are full of fear and doubt. The subconscious doesn't respond to words, it responds to feeling, to conviction, to the actual mental atmosphere you create. This is why you must learn to times feel times your desire is already fulfilled, not as something coming in the future but as a present reality. When you pray, you don't beg. You don't plead with the universe like a beggar at the gate. You claim. You accept. You give thanks for what is already yours in consciousness. I've seen people transform their entire financial situation simply by changing the feeling tone of their inner conversations. A man once came to me drowning in debt, terrified of losing his home. Every thought was saturated with fear. Every mental image was of catastrophe. I asked him, what would it feel like if all your debts were paid? If you opened your bank statement and saw abundance? At first, he couldn't even imagine it. The fear was too strong. But gradually, he learned to dwell in that feeling, to walk in the assumption that his financial worries were behind him. Within months, unexpected opportunities appeared. Money came from sources he never anticipated. Not because he worked harder, but because his consciousness had changed. Your subconscious doesn't care about your current circumstances. It doesn't consult your bank account before it begins to manifest. It responds only to the impression you make upon it. If you impress it with the feeling of wealth, it will find ways to make that feeling a reality. If you impress it with fear and lack, it will perpetuate those conditions with equal faithfulness. This is not wishful thinking. This is the science of consciousness. Your feeling is the secret. Your feeling is the power that moves the invisible forces of your subconscious mind. Words are important only insofar as they evoke feeling. Visualization matters only when it generates the emotional conviction of reality. So tonight, before you sleep, don't merely recite affirmations. Don't just repeat words mechanically. Instead, create a scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. Feel yourself living in that reality. Let the emotion of fulfillment wash over you. Let yourself be consumed by the joy, the relief, the satisfaction of having what you desire. This is not imagination for imagination's sake. This is not daydreaming. This is impressing upon your subconscious mind the pattern, the blueprint of what you wish to experience in your outer world. When you do this consistently, something miraculous happens. Your subconscious mind begins to accept this imaginal act as real. It cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and an actual experience. This is why athletes who visualize their performance improve just as much as those who physically practice. The subconscious accepts the mental rehearsal as reality and begins to reorganize your neural pathways, your beliefs, your expectations accordingly. And here's what most people miss. Once your subconscious accepts something as true, it must express it in your outer world. It has no choice. It is the law. It is as certain as the law of gravity. Your subconscious is the builder of your body and your world. When you impress a new pattern upon it, it goes to work immediately to manifest that pattern in physical form. But you must persist. You must be faithful to your vision. You cannot practice this technique once or twice and then abandon it when you don't see instant results. The subconscious mind needs repetition. It needs consistency. It needs you to remain loyal to the state you wish to embody. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't plant a seed and then dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. You plant it, you water it, you trust the process, and you wait. The seed is doing its work beneath the surface, invisible to your eyes, but very real nonetheless. Your imaginal acts are the same. They are working beneath the surface of your conscious awareness, rearranging circumstances, attracting opportunities, preparing the way for your desire to manifest. I've seen this work in countless lives. I've seen people heal themselves of so-called incurable diseases by faithfully imagining themselves healthy and whole. I've seen people attract wealth beyond their wildest dreams by consistently dwelling in the feeling of financial abundance. I've seen broken relationships restored, impossible goals achieved, and miraculous transformations occur. The secret they all shared wasn't superior willpower or special circumstances. It was simply this. They refused to accept the verdict of their senses as final. They refused to let current conditions dictate their inner state. Instead, they boldly claimed the fulfillment of their desire in consciousness first, and then waited with confident expectation for the physical manifestation. You see, most people have it backwards. They say, "I'll believe it when I see it." But the law of consciousness says, "You'll see it when you believe it." The visible world is always the effect, never the cause. Circumstances are the result, not the source. Everything you see around you, every condition, every relationship, every situation is simply the outward manifestation of inner mental patterns that have been habitual. This means you're never stuck. You're never trapped by circumstances. No matter how dire your situation appears, no matter how impossible your goal seems, you can always begin again in consciousness. You can always plant a new seed in the garden of your mind. You can always choose a new mental pattern, a new habitual feeling tone, a new self-concept. I remember a woman who came to one of my lectures absolutely convinced she was too old to find love. She was 57, had been divorced for 15 years, and had resigned herself to spending the rest of her life alone. Society had told her that women her age weren't desirable, that the time for romance had passed, that she should accept her fate gracefully. But I explained to her what I'm explaining to you now. Age is nothing but a concept in consciousness. Desirability isn't determined by the calendar, it's determined by your self-concept. If you think of yourself as unwanted, you radiate that frequency and attract experiences that confirm it. But if you dare to think of yourself as loved, cherished, and desired, regardless of what the mirror or calendar says, you set in motion causes that must produce corresponding effects. She took the teaching to heart. Every night before sleep, she would imagine herself in a loving relationship. She would feel the warmth of being adored. She would hear the words of affection spoken to her. She persisted in this mental diet despite seeing no evidence in her outer world. Within 4 months, she met a wonderful man who told her he'd been looking for her all his life. They married the following year, and she wrote to tell me it was the happiest chapter of her entire life. What changed? Not her age, not her appearance, not her circumstances. What changed was her consciousness, and the outer world simply rearranged itself to match. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Joseph, this all sounds wonderful, but what about the really difficult situations? What about when life throws something at you that feels completely beyond your control? And I want to address this head on, because it's perhaps the most important point I can make. The subconscious mind does not distinguish between what you call big and what you call small. It does not say, well, I can help you with finding a parking space, but a terminal illness? That's too much for me. No, the creative power within you is infinite. It is the same power that created galaxies, that orchestrates the perfect timing of every sunrise, that causes a seed to become a mighty oak. I've witnessed cases that would astound the most skeptical mind. A man diagnosed with an inoperable tumor, given weeks to live. The doctors had exhausted every option, but this man understood something profound. He understood that his body was not separate from his mind. that every cell in his body responded to the directions given by his consciousness. Each night before sleep, he would enter a state of deep relaxation. He would feel himself completely healthy, not hope for it, not wish for it. He would actually feel it as present reality. He would imagine his doctor's amazed face, hear the words, "The scans are clear. I can't explain it, but you're completely healthy." He would feel the handshakes, the embrace of his family, the tears of joy. He persisted in this for weeks. And when he returned for his scans, the tumor had vanished. Simply gone. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, a medical mystery. But there was no mystery. His consciousness had changed, and his body, being subject to consciousness, had no choice but to conform. You see, your body is not the solid, unchangeable thing you think it is. Every cell is constantly being renewed, replaced. You are literally creating a new body continuously. And the blueprint for that creation comes from your habitual thinking, from the images you consistently hold in your mind. This is why worry is so dangerous. When you worry about your health, you are actually impressing illness upon your subconscious. You are giving it the blueprint for disease. But when you maintain a consciousness of perfect health, of vitality, of strength, your body has no choice but to manifest that pattern. I have met people who were told by medical experts that they had only months to live, yet they refused to accept that verdict. They turned to the healing power within. They spent time each day in deep contemplation, visualizing themselves whole, healthy, vibrant. They felt the feeling of perfect health. They thanked their subconscious mind for the healing that was taking place. And do you know what happened? Years later, they returned to those same doctors, and the illness had completely vanished. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, but there was nothing spontaneous about it. It was the deliberate application of mental and spiritual law. Your body is constantly renewing itself. Every cell is being replaced. Scientists tell us that within 7 years, you have an entirely new body. But here's the question: are you building a new body based on old thoughts of disease, limitation, and decay? Or are you consciously directing the rebuilding process with thoughts of youth, vitality, and perfection? The choice is always yours. Your subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant, whether seeds of health or seeds of sickness, will grow and multiply. If you plant thoughts of fatigue, you will reap exhaustion. If you plant thoughts of weakness, you will reap frailty. But if you plant thoughts of strength, energy, and radiant health, your subconscious will produce exactly that in your body. Before you go to sleep tonight, speak to your subconscious. Tell it, "My body is a perfect expression of life. Every function operates in divine order. Every organ, every cell is filled with the light and energy of infinite intelligence. I am strong, I am healthy, I am whole." Repeat this with feeling. Let it sink deep into your inner mind. And then release it with faith, knowing that the healing power is already at work. The miraculous is not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to all who understand and apply these principles. Your subconscious mind does not judge whether you are worthy or unworthy. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and brings it into manifestation. Your subconscious mind is a faithful servant. It works day and night to manifest the patterns you have accepted as true. If you have accepted poverty, limitation, or fear, it will faithfully produce those conditions in your experience. But the moment you change your mental acceptance, the moment you impress new patterns upon your subconscious, it begins immediately to work on your behalf, to manifest these new conditions. I want you to understand something profound. Your subconscious mind does not argue with you. It does not say, "Are you sure about this? Is this really possible for you?" No. It accepts your habitual thinking as the blueprint for your life. This is why it is so crucial to become aware of what you are thinking and feeling throughout your day. Many people go through life as victims of their own unconscious thought patterns. They wonder why they keep experiencing the same problems, the same failures, the same disappointments. The answer is always the same: they have not changed the subconscious patterns that are creating these experiences. They are like a person complaining that the same music keeps playing while refusing to change the record. The great news is that you can change the record at any time. You can begin right now, in this very moment, to impress new patterns upon your subconscious mind. You do this through repetition, through feeling, through acceptance. You imagine the end result as already accomplished. You feel the reality of your desire in your heart. You give thanks for its manifestation even before you see physical evidence. This is not self-deception. This is the correct use of your imagination and your feeling nature. You are not pretending that your desire has manifested while knowing deep down that it has not. Rather, you are entering into the mental and emotional state that corresponds to your wish fulfilled. You are thinking from your desire rather than of your desire. When you think of your desire, you are still in a state of wanting, of lack, of separation from what you seek. But when you think from your desire, you have mentally assumed the state of already being or having what you want. This subtle shift makes all the difference. Your subconscious mind responds not to what you want, but to what you accept as true about yourself right now. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you want financial abundance. Most people think times abundance, while simultaneously feeling the lack of it. They say affirmations while their inner state remains unchanged. They're looking at their empty bank account and trying to convince themselves they're wealthy. This creates inner conflict, and the subconscious always wins this battle. But when you think times abundance, you ask yourself, how would I feel if I already had financial security? What would my inner dialogue be? How would I move through my day? You begin to inhabit that feeling state. You're not pretending or lying to yourself. You're selecting which aspect of reality to accept as true for you. Remember, consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being, you experience. This is why I've always emphasized the importance of feeling. Feeling is the secret. Your subconscious doesn't respond to words or empty affirmations. It responds to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you think from your desire, you naturally generate the feeling that corresponds to having it. This feeling is what impresses your subconscious mind and sets the creative forces in motion. Many people have asked me, how long does this take? The answer is, it takes as long as it takes for you to become convinced of the reality of your desire. Some people achieve this conviction in minutes, others take weeks or months. Time is not the factor. Conviction is the factor. When your subconscious is fully convinced that you already possess what you desire, it must manifest in your outer world. This is law. This is principle. This works as reliably as gravity. The moment you achieve this inner conviction, you can let go. You don't need to keep affirming or visualizing or worrying whether it will happen. You know it's done. There's a quiet certainty, a peace that comes from knowing. This is what Scripture means when it says, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Believe that you have received it. Not that you will receive it someday, not that you hope to receive it, that you have already received it. This is thinking from the end. This is living in the state of the wish fulfilled.